Okay, so I want to do one last video in this work on the Dead Sea Scrolls related to the identification of the Kittim, but I have no intention here to try to do a full treaty of the Kittim, because Kittim belongs in an eschatological um, discussion as much as anything. But I do want to hope to keep this short, I do want to take just a few moments to identify Kittim in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the in scriptures. So let's just start with the Dead Sea Scrolls translated. I've done a word search. We have 53 occurrences, and the first of these appears in just a comment here in the introduction in the history of the Qumran community, where it says the external enemy in parentheses, the Kittim, can be identified as the Romans. If that's a broad statement, as many have come to believe, and you'll see in other books where in general, people tend to associate the Kittim with the Romans for good cause, especially if you stay in the scriptures, and I'll explain that in a moment. But here he's saying the external enemy can be identified as the Romans. I will say, however, I don't think it's that simple, not even close. And if he's referring to a passage in the Habakkuk Pisha, which is the Habakkuk commentary, I do think they're referring to the Kittim there. And if he's referring to, but when we get to the Kittim of the War Scrolls, it's not wrong. It's not wrong anymore. So I'm going to try to go through this quickly. So here's just the only time he discusses it in the introduction is here at this point where he identifies them as Rome. And then we move off to the War Scroll. And then we have the majority of the references of the Kittim. Let me first just say, here's the Kittim identified as Ashur. Here's the Kittim in Egypt. So it's suggestive that we've got Kittim in Egypt. And here we're referencing the rule of the Kittim will come to an end. And down here it says, and on the day on which the Kittim fall. So what's important to our discussion today, since we're talking about identity, is the Kittim of Ashur and the Kittim in Egypt. See what else we find here. And the Kittim will come to an end. Kittim fall. War against the Kittim. Your hand against the Kittim. Now here, let me just, before I move away, from of old you foretold, this is the War Scroll, and from of old you foretold of the power of your hand against the Kittim, and Ashur will fall by the sword of no one. And this is an Isaiah passage. So Ashur, in this context here, the War Scroll is pushing us back to Ashur again as the identity of the Kittim, at least in the time of the War Scroll. King of the Kittim, camp of the Kittim, side of the Kittim, wounded of the Kittim, battle against the Kittim. So no identification there. The side, when the infantrymen reach the side of the Kittim line, army of the Kittim, battle against the Kittim shall be crushed without a remnant. All the camps of the Kittim, so nothing identifying them other than the fact that they exist and they have camps and armies and will have a certain end. And here we are still in the War Scroll. We've got the heroes of the Kittim, the dead of the Kittim, characteristics of the Kittim, but no identification of the Kittim. Here we're in the fragments of the War Scroll, so this will be a little bit redundant, but we're talking about against the Kittim, the wounded of the Kittim, against the Kittim, against the Kittim. Again, the characteristics and circumstances, but not identity in any of these. Opposite the camp of the Kittim, at the side of the Kittim, this is redundant. Wounded of the Kittim, the battle against the Kittim. When they reach the Kittim, and when they are at the side of the Kittim line, gathered in their positions over the dead of the Kittim. Ashur, here we're in the War Scroll. Ashur will fall. There will be a great panic among the sons of Japheth. Ashur will fall, and there will be no one to help him. The rule of the Kittim will come to an end. On the day on which the Kittim fall, against the Kittim, which the Kittim, okay, not helpful. The prince of the congregation, which I will, when we talked about the teacher of righteousness. I mean, this is an aside note. talk about the teacher of righteousness, but I believe this must be Isaiah. Nope, we're in the war scroll still, but Isaiah will talk about the prince of the congregation. And in the context of what we were studying with regard to the teacher of righteousness and the wicked priest as they relate to the community, and I had made reference to the idea that the teacher of righteousness was, he was over all of the faithful remnant, which would extend back to the beginning of Israel and on out to the future. They are the elect, the chosen. What word do you want to use that's used in Scripture? Well, here's a word for them as well: the congregation. So we have the prince of the congregation. So the prince of the congregation is the teacher of righteousness. The prince of the congregation is the Messiah. And here in this reference to the prince of the congregation and all Israel, or here is a reference to him. But there's more. Well, here, I've highlighted here in this fragment as well. And the prince of the congregation will kill him. And this is in context of will fall, a shoot will emerge from the stump of Jesse. So here's evidence that we're talking about the Messiah. The bud of David will go into battle with, and the prince of congregation will kill him. So prince of congregation is the bud of David. The prince of congregation is the stump of Jesse. The prince of congregation will go into battle with and kill him, which will be probably the king of the Kittim, or it'll be interesting to see. Let me say that I need to. The War Scroll has opened me up to so many things. And now Isaiah and these Dead Sea Scrolls are opening me up to so many things. And I have to completely reevaluate how I have perceived the 1,000-year reign that's taking place at that time, what happens in the decades and centuries just prior to the beginning of the 1,000 years. We've got this whole narrative of the Antichrist, which I think must still be true, but I've got to go reevaluate it all, because so much of what I'm finding related to the Kittim, related to the battles of Israel, are related to this period of time after the 1,000 years. So it'll be a completely different study. Okay, so let me go back here. We have destruction of the Kittim, upon the Kittim, but no identification here. Which blank Kittim after him. Okay. And we have king of the Kittim comes. This is an interpretation. Is this Habakkuk? No, this is Isaiah. This is the Isaiah Pesher commentaries or interpretations. The king of the Kittim comes from his climb to the plain of Akko to do battle against Palestine. I have to stop because this will take me off in a direction. Because I think what we find in Isaiah now, and then in the interpretation, is that some of what Isaiah is talking about is not the Battle of Armageddon or at the end of time here at the end of the 6,000 years, but the end of time, the Battle of Gog and Magog that takes place after the 1,000-year period. Okay, so King of the Kittim, concerns the Kittim, War of the Kittim, are the commanders of the Kittim. Going. Concerns the Kittim. This interpretation concerns the Kittim. For the Kittim are Bashan. Okay, this might be identification. For the Kittim are Bashan, since, and his king is called Carmel, and his chiefs Lebanon, and the bloom of Lebanon, since the sons of his faults. All right, interesting. Kittim are Bashan, and I do think I saw references to Bashan in the War Scroll. We'll have to see. But not, it's too fragmented, not enough to know here. Then we have, let's see, here's in Isaiah, and then they're interpreting with Demetrius of Greece, which is Yvonne. I won't go into it, but this is the chiefs of the Kittim, which I do think they're talking about, because God did not deliver up Jerusalem to the Greeks, or into the hands of the kings of Yavon, from Antiochus up to the appearance of the chiefs of the Kittim. And in this context, I do believe we're talking about the Kittim of Rome. So if you think about Jerusalem, it was, first of all, Assyria destroyed the northern kingdoms, destroyed Samaria. Okay. But Jerusalem was first destroyed when Babylon came. So we had the Kittim of Babylon come and destroy Jerusalem. And then we had, after Babylon, we had Persia, who allowed the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And then we had the Greeks come. And the Greeks created lots of problems. Antiochus created lots of problems for Jerusalem, but Jerusalem was not destroyed. It wasn't until Rome came in 70 AD that the chiefs of the Kittim destroyed Rome again. In fact, here it says, did not deliver Jerusalem into the hands of the kings that had gone from Antiochus up to the appearance of the chiefs of the Kittim, which would be Rome, but later it will be trampled. So almost certainly this is prophetic. Whoever's writing this, I don't think it had happened yet. It's speaking future tense, will be trampled. Okay, but it's fragmented and we don't really know. So we have 10 more occurrences of the Kittim. Another interpretation concerns the Kittim, who are swift and powerful in battle to slay. Okay. In the kingdom of the Kittim, and concerns the interpretation of this concerns the Kittim. Due to the fear and dread they provoke, concerns the Kittim, who trample the land with their horses and their animals. This concerns the leader of the Kittim, who despise the fortresses of the people and disdain them, and laugh at them, surround them with a huge army to capture them, and through dread and fear surrender to them. All right. And this interpretation concerns the leader of the Kittim, who on the resolution of the house of blame go one by one in front of the other. No identification there, just details again. Of the Kittim, and they will garner their wealth with all their loot, like the fish of the sea. I believe this had to do with Rome gathering up the loot of the last priests. It might say it elsewhere here. It concerns a Kittim who will cause many to die by the edge of the sword. Okay. However, in the last days, their riches, which are the priests of Jerusalem, their riches will fall into the hands of the army of the Kittim. And I do think in this context, because of the timing of what has happened in history, this Kittim would be Rome again. And so this is Habakkuk. By the way, this is the Habakkuk Pesharim, which is the commentaries. And then we're back to the first one where we have the external enemy of the Kittim. So except for, just to summarize this, except for Egypt and Assyria, and then Rome, I think we have enough here to identify Rome. But other than that, we really just have descriptions of the Kittim, who they are, not who they are, but the characteristics of them and their kings and different things and what they did, and, their acts and their accomplishments. So really, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think we have identification of the Kittim as not only Rome, but also Ashur and Egypt. Let's go to the scriptures, the old writings. Okay, so here we are in the old writings, the scriptures. And I just did a word search, and I'm using the Yah scriptures. I did a word search for Kittim. We have 8 occurrences in all of scripture. And we are in Genesis chapter 10, the first time Kittim is mentioned here. And it's mentioned first as the son of Yahuan. Yahuan is actually, you heard me say Yavan a few moments ago in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but Yawan is what became Greece, the Yawanites. When you get into the Hebrew and the English version of the Hebrew word, it's Yawan. So Yawan is the Greeks. So let's back this up. We have the sons of Japheth, which is Japheth. We have Gomer and Magog, and we know these from end times discussion where the Kittim come along. We have Gog of Magog, and then we have Madai, and then we have Yawan, and we have Tubal, and we have Meshech, and we have Tyrus. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah. And the sons of Yahuan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodan. So, now we don't see it here. You know what? Give me a second here. Well, actually, let's see what the next one is. I'm going to come back to this too, because this is the first time we see it mentioned is with Kittim. But I'm going to head off in a moment to Jubilees, because in Jubilees we get, in the days of Peleg, that land was divided amongst the sons of Noah, and then the sons of Noah then divided amongst their sons. And so we have more discussion of Kittim in Jubilees as it relates to the son of Jehuan and the lands that he was given during the dividing of the land. So I'm sorry, let me go to the next version of Kittim. Okay, so here we are. The ships, and ships shall come from the coast of Kittim, and they shall afflict Ashur and afflict Eber, and so shall Amalek, and he also perishes. And Balaam arose and left and returned to his place, and Balak also went his way. All right, historically, and again, this is more than what I would want to get into right now. I would have thought of this as end times, and end times being the time of the Antichrist and the big war that we come up with. But what I'm learning now, when you get into the war scroll, is we've got all these players: Amalek, the Canaanites, Cain. And the ships come from the coast of Kittim, and they shall afflict Ashur and afflict Eber, and so shall Amalek, and he also perishes. And what is this? This is Numbers, and this is the prophecy of Balaam. Um, you know, which is Balaam, but most people would know him as Balaam, who prophesied he was supposed to come and curse Israel, but instead bless them, because he could not do anything other than what Yahweh allowed him to do. And so he ended up blessing him, and then talked about the times here, where we have the coast of Kittim. Coast of Kittim. So in this moment, we're referencing Kittim as the coast of Kittim. So it's not a people, it's a place. And we're talking about ships that come from that place. Yes. Okay. So I'm sorry, let's go to the next one. Now we are in Isaiah. And the message is concerning Zoar. Howl, you ships of Tarshish, for it has been destroyed, without house, without harbor. From the land of Kittim it has been revealed to them. Just like we just had in Numbers, we had the coast of Kittim. Now we have the land of Kittim. We have people and things coming from the land of Kittim, which I'm going to go into in a moment to show you the land of Kittim in Jubilees. In fact, let me just do that now. Let me pause and come back in with Jubilees. Okay, so here we are in the Yubelin, which is Jubilees. Make sure you have Jubilees. And it's the first occurrence. What I've done is I've pulled up all of what would be called the Apocrypha, a compilation of Apocrypha, 1,758 pages of the various books of, well, let me see what all's included in here. It tells me. So it would be books like, pretty much all of the, maybe not entirely all of the, what would be considered the Apocrypha, but an awful lot of the books, including the first and second Maccabees here, which will kind of be important in this discussion. So let's go to the first. Now, I'm going to look up Yawan first, because it has context to Kittim. Because if you remember what we just read in Genesis, Kittim is a son of Yahuan, and then I said, well, Yawan are the Greeks. Well, let me go further and explain that. And before I do, remember that Kittim was one of the sons of Yahuan. And let me tell you the context here of where we're at, because well, here we've got the sons of Japheth, which are the sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Madai, and Yawan. Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. These are the sons of Noah. And is this the separation? No, that is not the separation. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so is this the separation? Okay, yeah. So here's where this is during the days of Peleg. The land is being divided. The continents aren't being divided. The lands are being divided amongst the sons of Noah, and then the sons of Noah divided amongst their own sons. And so we had a certain portion. It's to the north that went to Japheth, but then Japheth, which if you look at, let me make this larger for you. Japheth, the son of Noah, who got the cold portion, basically Europe and the cold portions. He also divided the land of his inheritance among his sons. And the first portion came forth for Gomer to the east, and from the north and to the side of the river Tina. And in the north came forth for Magog, Gog of Magog, all the inner portions of the north until it reaches the sea of Miet. And for Madai came forth his portion that he should possess from the west of his two brothers to the island and to the coast of the islands. And for Yawan came forth the fourth portion, every island and the islands which are towards the border of Lud. And I think we just read in, was it one of the two? We'll go back and revisit the Yas. Well, actually, maybe just go do it now. Um, from the land of Kittim, and here from the coast of Kittim. And this is Numbers, and from the coast of Kittim. And we have other references of Kittim in, I believe, in the Dead Sea Scroll, where they will come from the islands and different things. But here we are, the coast of Kittim, islands, etc. And for Yawan came forth the fourth portion, every island and the islands which are toward the border of Lud. Okay, we don't go into Kittim here, but if you go back to Yah scriptures, to the first occurrence of Kittim, we know that Kittim is one of the sons of Yahuan. And so all of these sons of Yahuan would have received gifts of land. They also would have created, so their lands would have been known as lands in different times. So we have, as the division of the land takes place, we have Japheth giving to Yawan, Yawan giving to Kittim. Okay, let's go back to the extra writings because I do think this might be important too. So Yawan came forth, and then ultimately, so we have the islands for Yawan, and then ultimately this would mean that the Kittim are, as descendants of Yahuan, are coming from here as well. So let me make it smaller as I do this. Let's go to the next occurrence. So we have, these are the sons of Japheth. This is what we just read in Genesis. These are the sons of Japheth: Gomer, Magog, Medai, Yahuan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus. And the sons of Yahuan are Elisha. This is why I couldn't find it as Kittim, because it's Shittim here. Shittim, but that's Kittim. The sons of Yahuan were Elisha, Tarshish, Shittim, and Dodanim. And the sons of Dubal were, and let's see if they talk about me. Let me see how many times we get to this, and why isn't it pulling? Oh, Shittim. Get an I in there. If we do a search on that, there's Shittim, and there are 6 occurrences, and this is the first of. And the children of the Shittim are the Romites. This is interesting. I've never seen this. So the children of the Shittim are the Romites in the valley of Canophah by the river Tibru. Are Romites Romans? I don't really know. Interesting. This would be a study for another day for me, but I've always looked up Kittim instead of Shittim. And see what else it says. And the children of Israel journeyed from the plain of Moab and camped by the Yarden, from Beit Yeshimoth even to Abel Hashittim, the end of the plains of Moab. And when the children of Israel dwelt in the plain of Shittim, they began to commit whoring. Okay. Not what we're after here. Once again, the children of Moab did to Israel what took place in the plain of Shittim, journeyed from Shittim, and they journeyed from Yahushua and Yisrael with him past the Yarden. Okay, so let me go. That was the last one. So let's go back to then Yawan. Because what I really want to do is in these, and we'll see it in the Maccabees. Sorry, in the Maccabees, we're going to see how the Yawanites are defined as the Kittim by the Maccabees, the writings of the Maccabees. So here, for Yawan came forth the fourth portion. So here's the dividing of the land again, and then here are the sons of Yawan, and these are the sons again of Japheth, included Yawan. Okay, the children. Okay, this is kind of important. Now, this is Jasher, and I don't really want to go into too much because there's some question about whether Jasher is real or a problem. I mean, there are people who are picking it apart, and I'm not arguing with them. So you need to tread lightly with the book of Jasher. But he says the children of Yawan are the Yawanites, and which only makes sense, Yawanites. But this comes up later. Um, we're still in Jasher. Let me get through Jasher. Okay, here we are in the first book of the Maccabees. And let me just read this for you. And it came to be after Alexandros, son of Philippos, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim. Okay, so Alexander, who conquered of Greece, of Macedonia, came out of the land of the Kittim and had smitten Darius, which is Darius, sovereign of Paras, which is Persia, and Madai, that he reigned in his place, the first over Yahuan. Okay, so here's where we're getting Greece identified as Yahuan, the first over Yahuan, and coming from the land of Kittim, coming out of the land of Kittim and within the land of Yahuan. So we had the coastal and the islands being given to the Yahuan, the son Yahuan, and the son Yahuan's one of Yahuan's son was Kittim, and we're identifying a land of the Kittim here. Let's see what else we get. Okay, and reigned 137 years of the reign of the Yawanites. So we understand Yawanites. You'll see Yawanites. If you were to read from the Hallelujah scriptures or the Yah scriptures, you would see Yawan and Yawanites a lot because it's Greeks. It's Greece, it's Greeks, it's the Greek language, it's Yawanites. All right, so okay, that's enough from here. Let me go ahead and go back to the scriptures, and we just saw the first of occurrences that we're identifying Kittim as the son of Yahwan, who was given coastal lands in the area of uh, Japheth's offerings. And the ships come from the coast of the Kittim, which would be the land of the Kittim that was given to the son of Yahuan. And then we have from the land of Kittim in Isaiah, it has been revealed to them. And it's kind of interesting because maybe Rome is considered part of the land of Kittim too, not just interesting. But you can't get from the land of Kittim, you can't get Assyria. So it's kind of interesting where it all ends up going. Okay, our eyes pass over to Kittim. Here we are still in Isaiah. Um, Arise, pass over to Kittim. Even there you shall find no rest, daughter of Zion. Okay. Pass beyond the isles. Here are the islands in the coast of Kittim. A reference to the area of Kittim again. From the oaks of Bashan, there was a reference in the Dead Sea Scrolls that I made mention of that we have Bashan. So the Kittim included the Bashan. They made your deck with ivory from the coast of Kittim. So here's Kittim identified as the lands and probably the island lands of the Kittim again. For the ships, now this is Daniel, for the ships from Kittim shall come against him and he shall lose heart. So this is talking about Antiochus. And this is what we've been talking about, the ships from Kittim, which maybe included Rome, from those islands. But either way, we know that these ships from Kittim, because we have the history of Rome coming against Antiochus and stopping him. And then Antiochus returned and raged against the Kodesh covenant and acted and shall return and consider those who forsake the Kodesh covenant. So he came and declared war against the Kodesh covenant and made friends with those who would forsake the Kodesh covenant. So all of the Jews who forsook their ways, the Hellenistic priests, etc., would have been received by Alexander. Then we have Kittim. This is in First Chronicles, and the sons of Yahuan, Elisha, Tarshisha, Kittim, and Rodanim. Okay, and lastly, I want to revisit the complete Dead Sea Scrolls in English, and because they have some interesting things to say about the Kittim, and then I'll summarize and we'll close it out. But here I am. I just want to make a reference here. There were 74 occurrences, and I'm on occurrence 19. I just wanted to point this out. He's got a section entitled "The Decipherment of Particular Allusions." And then he says, "The age of wrath having been identified as that of the Hellenistic crisis of the beginning of the 2nd century BCE, maybe. The root of the Hasidim of the pre-Maccabean age, and the Kittim as the Romans." Okay, so basically he's saying in passing that the Kittim is identified as the Romans. Now, if you want to limit the discussion to the Kittim in the days of this community and in the days of Antiochus, yeah, the Kittim were the Romans. They were the Romans. But I think he references, he also has a summary similar to the summary I'm getting ready to make. So give me just a second to find that. Okay, so here's the section that deals with this. And we are in the chronological framework. And here's what I'm getting ready to read starting here. As for the terminus ad quum of Qumran history, as this is linked to the appearance of the Kittim, we have to determine who these people were. In its primitive sense, the word Kittim described the inhabitants of Kition, a Phoenician colony in Cyprus. Maybe, but I'm not sure about that because Kittim, would have been given land. Kittim would have been the son of Yawan, who was given portions of land in the area of Yawan, which maybe included the Phoenician colony, but I don't think it was, and Cyprus, but I don't think it was limited to that. Maybe. Later, the name tended to be applied indiscriminately to those living in all islands and most maritime countries. And that's according to Josephus in Antiquities. Okay, so that would explain some of what's happening when we start talking about Kittim, because we would be talking about a specific people from a specific coast and specific land, but later they seem to be referencing something more and something bigger than just people of that land. Let's continue. But from the 2nd century BCE, Jewish writers also used Kittim more precisely to denote the greatest world power of the day. And that's part of where I'm headed here. In Maccabees, they are Greeks. Alexander the Great and Perseus are called kings of the Kittim. In Daniel, on the other hand, the Kittim are Romans. It was the ambassador of the Roman Senate, Populus Laenus, brought to Alexandria by ships of Kittim, i.e., the Roman fleet, who instructed the king of the north, the Seleucid monarch Antiochus Epiphanes, to withdraw at once from Egypt. The term Romans is substituted for Kittim already in the Old Greek or Septuagint version of Daniel 11, verse 30. None of these texts is critical to the Kittim. They are seen as the ruling force of the time, but not as hostile to Israel. In fact, in Daniel, they humiliate the enemies of the Jews. It is not till a later stage, especially after 70 CE, that they come to symbolize oppression and tyranny. In the Habakkuk commentary, the portrait of the Kittim is neutral, and as in Maccabees and Daniel. And then he goes on. Okay. And since the identification, let me go down here. Since the identification of Kittim as Romans is nowadays generally accepted, it will suffice to cite a single but very striking feature in the Habakkuk commentary to support it. Interpreting Habakkuk 1 as referring to the Kittim, the commentator writes, this means that they sacrifice to their standards and worship their weapons of war. Okay, that's enough. I think, hopefully, that was helpful and not confusing. Let me just suffice it to say that I don't think we can, in our circles, in Christianity, with a quick understanding, the moment they say Kittim, everybody thinks of Rome and the Romans, which would be true and good for the use of the Kittim and the ships of Kittim in the book of Daniel. But when you get into the Dead Sea Scrolls and you see, and even the apocryphal writings, and you see Kittim used a few more times, and you see Kittim used against the Greeks or for the Greeks, and then you see Kittim used for at least Assyria, there's no question that we're saying the Kittim of Assyria in the War Scrolls. And then later, I think we probably have Kittim in Egypt as well, because that's what makes the most sense when we're reading the War Scroll. So I would agree that the idea of Kittim initially started where they came from, the actual lands of Kittim. But with time, as I think the people of Kittim must have been a pretty strong, I'm surmising here, but the people of Kittim must be in a pretty fierce and strong grouping of people. I think that with time, they used the term that Kittim more precisely, according to Jewish writers, would have precisely denoted the greatest world power of the day. I'm not sure I 100% buy that. And the reason I say that is that we had in the War Scroll, we had the Kittim of Assyria or Ashur, and we had, I'm confident that we had Kittim in Egypt. Rather than say that the Kittim is the greatest world power of the day, I think that the use of Kittim in Jewish writing, and I don't like to use the word Jewish, not only because it tends to limit things. I'm going to say in the writing of the Yehudim, which would have been the people of the lands of Israel in that time, as their writings developed, I think they began to use Kittim. And when they referenced Kittim, and I think this is what's happening in the War Scroll, where the vast majority of the use of Kittim takes place alongside of a few more things. When we get to the New Jerusalem and a couple of other things, we get into other discussions of the Kittim there too. But the vast majority is in the War Scroll. And in the War Scroll, it seems to me at this point that when we're referring to Kittim, we're really just talking about very powerful Gentiles. So when we say Kittim of Ashur, we could be saying the very powerful Gentiles, the grouping of people that are in the lands of Ashur. And when we talk about the Kittim of Egypt, we're talking about the very powerful Gentiles, the very powerful people who are in the land of Egypt. So that when we have the Kittim of the land of Ashur doing battle with the Kittim of the land of Egypt, we're just talking about two very powerful groups of Gentiles doing battle against each other. When Maccabees says that Greece is the Kittim of his day, um, okay, because they were the very powerful Gentiles of the land, and then having come from the land of Yewan too. But then later we end up with Rome being Kittim, and maybe Rome is also the land of Yewan too. I think maybe from what I just read, it could be. But either way, we have the very powerful of Greece butting up against the very powerful of Rome. And by the time of Aristobulus and what was taking place with Antiochus, by that time, the very powerful Gentiles of Rome had gotten bigger and more powerful than the very powerful Gentiles of Greece. And I think that is I think that's the most likely candidate for the use of Kittim that I'm seeing everywhere I turn. And I don't know how important it is, except for in the eschatological context of especially the War Scroll, because there's an awful lot to speak about in the War Scroll. But what I would like to offer here, and this is a longer video than I intended, to just basically say to you as a potential listener that don't allow yourself to, every time you hear Kittim, think Rome only. Fine, think of Rome when you see it in Daniel. Think of Rome in some of the, like the Habakkuk commentaries or the Pesher, because I think they're referencing Rome. But you can't 100% think of Rome every time you hear the word Kittim, because Kittim can be Ashur, it can be Greece. I thought it could be Babylon. Now I would have to find that again, but I didn't find it in this right here. Uh, but I would also say that the Kittim seem to just have references to very strong Gentiles, powerful grouping of Gentiles. All right. Thank you. Maybe Baruch.